And now we go to the panel discussion, and our moderator will be my lovely and inspiring colleague, Hossein, and he's also father of this event, I think. Hossein is an engineer, design visionary, and educator, and he works in Ramboll as a global design director. Welcome. And do you make this one?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you all for being with us and investing your day. And I hope that you've enjoyed what you've seen so far. I have to introduce, to ask Ivan and Will to please join us on the panel while I introduce our two additional panelists. Elina Kalya. Please, yeah. Elina is the Global Sustainability Director for Ramboll Transport, where she works with more than 3,500 Ramboll colleagues in the infrastructure and mobility sectors. She is nominally based in Finland, but she travels extensively for work. Yeah. Well, her ambition is not limited to improving Ramboll's projects, but also to guiding the industry towards a more sustainable and regenerative future. That makes her a perfect candidate for our leadership session. That it is not about us only, but it is about our industry. Second panelist, Laura Brill. Laura, I've lost your... I know who you are, but I've been told to be saying these things. Sorry. Yeah, Laura is a sustainability director in Ramboll Buildings in the UK, the entire UK. Ramboll, UK and Ireland. This is what UKI stands for. I just learned this. UKI and UKI. Leading the implementation of our global sustainability strategy and UK and Ireland commitments. Laura holds masters in public policy from Harvard and brings a holistic perspective to sustainability, drawing from her experience in town planning, housing developments, ESG strategy, and investment management. How did I do? Under the circumstances. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I think maybe we try to have maybe this final session a little bit more interactive, so that if you like to get engaged with more questions, I'll be more than happy to invite you. Maybe I start with one question each for each of you while you guys are thinking about your questions, please. Perhaps with Elina. Over lunch, we just bumped into each other, and I just reminded her of a quote I had recently read from Nora Bateson, a dear friend of Vanessa's. Something like, I hope I don't mess it up, but something like, if we are to think ourselves out of the current mess that we are in, how can we do it if our thinking is part of that mess as well? Something like that. Would you like to speak to that? Would you like to tell us? What do you think? Is the way we think is flawed, and we're using a flawed system to try and repair a system which is already flawed, and all those things?
Thanks, Hossein, and thanks for the great presentations. I think we need the radical collaboration, co-creation, and that really needs also this new kind of thinking. And I think it means actually this sort of spiritual and cultural transformation. And I think Albert Einstein said also that if we can't fix our problems with the same thinking that we had when we created them. And here I think we need to approach this from a new angle. And I think we need, the big common goal and the first thing would be to think that how can we, everyone fall in love with this amazing planet, really create some feelings, some really deep feelings, and then we maybe remember what Paul said about the safety belt, but what about the planet? There's something that you deeply care about, and here also another quote from Einstein was that if we look deep into the nature, we understand everything better. And I think here is a lot of wisdom with all the systems thinking, also from the leadership point of view. How can we actually create adaptive organizations in this type of situation? How can we actually work in smaller systems so that we create value to the wider system and kind of share the leadership as well instead of the traditional one? So how can we actually function better as a system? And that really needs a different kind of leadership and also different kind of discussion on not just processes but interactions. Well, how do we actually work together? So it's these type of things.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Thank you. That is great. But sort of tongue in cheek, I don't know whether I've shared it with you or Einstein also has said that half the things that people say I have said, I haven't actually said it. But these two he has. I'm sure these two. I've checked them. Yeah.
Can I say one more?
Yeah,
Actually,
sure.
this is the organizational part, but then we are all humans, and I think when we get scared, stressed, we concentrate on the small things and not discuss on the right things. And this sort of how do we create urgency, the feeling of urgency without fear? And this is a lot about this psychological safety, and we are all responsible of creating this right kind of atmosphere to be able to encourage our colleagues, partners, whoever, to really ask these questions that 5-year-old could ask. So I think that's the very simple things. How do we actually react if someone says something controversial or new or something difficult? So I think it's something for everyone to think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you for that. Connecting that to education, the 5-year-olds, and there's this the late Ken Robinson, the great sort of educator, who's also a great stand-up comedian. I think he can do both of them perfectly. He could do when he was alive. And he was said that we're all born geniuses. We just get educated out of them. And there's like this curve, a statistic that he shows that apparently you can quantify genius. Some educators where like you show a paper clip to someone and say, can you describe, how many uses can you describe for this? Some people can say 1, 2, 5. There are people who can then describe what they could do with a paper clip, like 100 options. And if you get to that, then you're a genius according to that number. So the thing is that 5-year-olds are 95% of them qualify as being geniuses. And by the time we get to 27, and whoever is older than 27 will fall into this category, so like only 2%. So so as if we get educated and standardize out of it, something that was discussed in session A. Laura, I know circularity is something which is very close to your heart, and we've sort of spoken about it in the context of Ramboll and the work that we do. How can our leaders create that environment where our people feel secure to be experimenting with items and issues like circularity, proposing ideas, coming up with potential experimentation and ideas with that? You have a team working. How can we do that more?
That's a really interesting question. So I think a lot of things have touched on this during the day, and in fact your sort of illustration there is around that spirit of curiosity and inquiry, and that it's very easy to get pulled down into the sort of the prioritization, which I think Holly mentioned earlier on today, of you have to think about the thing that is the most important to you. And actually what we need to do is expand and throw away what we think is important and be able to look more broadly. So we actually, in Ramble, are currently running something, actually we're focusing on nature rather than circularity, but doing a Dragon's Den of innovation for inviting our colleagues at any position, any discipline, to make proposals as to how we can better embed nature into our building design, and not putting any limits on sort of what that might end up looking like, but just really inviting sort of that co-creation between colleagues, because we don't have the answer. And I think that goes to that question, if our thinking is part of the problem, how do we change our thinking? And surely it's by including other people in the conversation or making the conversation different. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about in terms of leadership and groups is that rather than focusing on a single voice being the leader or being correct, that you work as a group and you welcome awkward perspectives to the conversation, so that it is anyone, in the same way that we invite anybody to stop work for safety issues on a construction site, anybody can raise issues with a design or an approach from a sustainability perspective or a design perspective, and they have the right to be heard. In the same way that we say buildings have the right to be heard, everyone in the room has the right to be heard. And actually, if we take the time to stop and listen, then we can improve the decisions. Because it will, if our initial reaction, if our instinctive reaction is, oh, for God's sakes, leave that, come on, we don't have time for that, we don't have time for that. It's actually when we need to stop, pause, and turn and ask some more questions. Because it's not something that we've thought about, or at least if it's something that we're really, really sure, we need to at least bring that person along with us and give them a chance to get to that same place.
Ivan, you mentioned Richard in your presentation, as you know, and what I picked was the positive vibes that you picked up as him having been your leader at some stage. Perhaps these are my words, but behind you we have two of them. The founders of Ramble, who were like Richard, would go well beyond the boundaries of architecture. I'm an architect. I design buildings, or I design neighborhoods, or I design products. But they would actively engage in the impact that their work would have on the society, the context, much wider, the city, and so. And the leadership that they would offer, not only to the practice, I would say, to the industry and to the profession overall, and to industry overall. When we were curating this session, we were thinking about whether designers have any role, architects, engineers, designers have any role in designing the leadership structure of the future, of our social structures. Of course, this morning, we were talking about even the justice that we are all striving to have, whether it's environmental or social. Do you think us as engineers, architects, have something to offer in that context, or should we just sort of stay where we are with core competence and things like that?
I think, certainly our profession, the space we work is very public, and I think we do have a lot to offer, and I think we're always actually disappointed by the reluctance of particularly architects to step forward. The representation in government is virtually non-existent, and I think Richard was probably unique in the latter part of the last century, the beginning of this century, in actually being an architect that was engaged in the inevitable politics. And it's only through unfortunately, being engaged at that level, which is called political, I think that you can effect any change. He was constantly frustrated by it, and I have to say, I think he always felt he could do with some help. The help was never forthcoming. I think we do have a tendency, and that's been mentioned more than once this afternoon, that if we feel a bit anxious, we go back to what we know. I think certainly the complexity of what we're involved with should give us those tools. As a little anecdote, we did a project with the special forces. Or rather, they wanted to do a project, and we advised them. And after going away, we didn't get involved. They came back and said, we've done all the most impossible things in the world, but we couldn't get this project to work. How on earth do you work as in this profession and get stuff to happen? So I do think we're capable of it. We're not aware of it, and it probably is a case of it's just you have it as a different mindset that you have to engage with through that place, that system.
Yeah, that's people like Richard would get involved in a system that would not support them. They would go in as individuals. But if there were opportunities for us to even as a project to design the system, which would then be much more producing the outcomes, which are less damaging, less degenerative, and more regenerative. Using those words would be perhaps something that I suggest we have the competence and the capabilities to offer it collectively. And as Will, you mentioned the collaboration, sharing of information. You didn't mention it, but I do a little bit of propaganda for Ramboll. We have decided to share the embodied carbon footprint of our buildings. The compare that Paul leads together with his team. Under that scheme, we calculated the embodied carbon footprint of our projects, and we publicly share the second version of it has just come out. And we're inviting all our people we used to call competitors in the regenerative environment that we are in. We call them industry partners to likewise follow our leadership, if you like. And what do you think? Is that something that you think more of our industry partners will take on and become part of?
I hope so. Yeah. I think a lot of this comes down to your goal, right? And this question of how do you change things with the same skill set that you made the problem with in the first place? Well, there's no reason to say you can't apply the same set of skills to get set out of the problem, but the goal's got to be different. And the goal prior to releasing embodied carbon footprints projects, the goal might have been to better understand it so that we can prove that we can make the lowest carbon buildings so that we can go off and win the right projects to do that. Maybe now the goal is, well, actually the whole industry needs to be able to do this, and so our goal is to share how well we're doing and hold ourselves to account. And it can be the same set of skills, but it's a different goal. If you look at my favourite story on this is Yasmin Lari, who's a Pakistani architect who won the Viva Gold Medal, I think a year or two ago, maybe 2 years ago. And she has spent most of her career doing these huge, impressive projects. And she was like one of Pakistan's top architects. And then she went into retirement, and when she came out of retirement, she had changed her goal. She came out of retirement to say, I'm going to basically work on social housing. It's going to be as close to zero carbon as I get it. It's going to help train people. It's going to help provide jobs and careers to people who wouldn't have had them. And she took the same set of skills that she had used in her first career that she made her name with and used it to do a tremendous amount of good. And if you look at the work that she's done since then, she's created tens, if not hundreds of thousands of homes with these skills. We can totally apply it, but you need a different goal, and you need a better goal, and you need a goal that is not about making this firm the most successful firm ever. It's about somehow making, this species not kill ourselves, which is kind of what we're on course to do if we don't start to change our end goal.
I think maybe be open to you. Anybody questions for the beautiful panel that we have, the opportunity you have. Yes, up there.
Thank you. I wanted to start by praising, sorry, my name is Paloma, I work for Rumble. I want to start by praising Ivan on the Madrid Barajas Airport. I'm Spanish, and I'm not sure if you're aware of how loved and praised the design is in my country. Were you aware of this?
We're aware that it's very much loved. Yes.
It's very
Okay.
It's very modern.
It's lovely. Yeah, I agree with that. But it's interesting because obviously I work in the building construction and you know, I get to appreciate architecture as much as I think everyone in this room does. But, you know, there is many other people that actually publicly comment on that. And actually that leads to my question for the panel and I guess everyone else. We've always been told as leaders that feedback is the power of feedback, both giving and receiving when we are leaders. And I wonder how much are we in contact with the end product that we are providing, the end design, the end building, and how much are we obtaining from that to then apply it to the future of what we design afterwards. And our responsibility of leaders to seek for that. Thank you.
Well, you have to take that.
Nice. My son works in community engagement, which obviously is a sort of formalized way of engaging with people who will more likely, let's say, interface with what's about to come. I think, you know, we as architects, our duty is, we have duty to the planet, of course, but we have an absolute duty to people who use our buildings, not just work or live or play in them, but also who pass them by, engage with them in any form. And I think it's on that basis, I think approaching your architecture with an awareness of the impact that you are likely to have, and that influencing the design is probably the most important starting point. It's, you know, we have, and I think we have projects, more recent projects where there's more formal engagement with community that we've enjoyed very much, because actually what we're learning when you're presented in that forum is there's a lot of commonality in what people feel comfortable about, especially if you can explain it to them. I find more complicated the notion that a group of completely disparate people can come up with an answer. And that is where, in the end, a conductor has to come in to try to form some sort of direction. But, you know, the clients often aren't aware that they are part of the design team. Of course they are. They are absolutely critical. And of course, so are the people who the building will serve.
Yeah.
Well, so I think there's also there's a real lack of feedback in terms of the even wider effects that we have on all the other people who never come into contact with our work, right? And we are only starting to recognise this in terms of use of materials coming into the sort of mainstream engineering world in the last few years. Some people have been doing this decades, don't get me wrong, but as a sort of mainstream topic of conversation, it's only in the last few years. That somebody mentioned before this idea, you know, you can't smell or see carbon dioxide being emitted. And if you want a concrete to a construction site, you don't see the impacts that adds to in the atmosphere or the effects of what that does. And I think it's worth trying to gain some of that feedback by exposing ourselves to either go and see parts of the world that have been hit by drought for 5 years in a row and see how hard it is for people to try to survive there. It changes your understanding what climate change means. It's quite difficult to that word, climate change. Or go and see how these materials are produced. I must confess, I've never been to see the production of either concrete or steel. But I remember when an academic friend of mine, Nick, who works up in Sheffield University, told me if you went to see the cement factory that's in the middle of the Peak District, and he stood underneath these cement kilns, and these things are the length of a jumbo jet and the height of a house. There's two of them, and they rotate, and they basically have a jet flame going down the middle of them that burns pulverized coal, and it has to do so 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, because if it stopped, the whole thing would stop and walk and crack it and die. So this thing's got, the bottom of a Saturn V rocket inside it, blasting down it all day, every day to make cement to fuel our industry. And he said that when he visited it, he got told it hasn't rained underneath this kiln because it's outside. Rain does not touch the floor since they turned it on because the rain evaporates before it can get there. And I think that if you get a bit of feedback like that, if you go and find Nick and Steve gets feedback from him, that changes your perception of the damage that gets done with these materials. And I think that once you start to understand the damage that's done with these materials that we use, maybe you start treating them as more valuable than perhaps you were doing before.
Sure. Can I just add something, and Alina and Laura as well? See, the question that Paul's daughter has posed for us now really has made me really think as where does all this stuff come from? That is like true leadership. One of the signs of leadership I've seen today amongst all of us. That is one that is making us think about these things. And I think you mentioned about concrete or steel. If you see some of the red meat, the way slaughterhouses operate, I think if you actually go there, a lot of us will not touch red meat again. So it is important for us to answer that question that we've been posed by Paul, and that's a great sense of leadership that I've seen today. What do you think?
Yeah, I had a sort of two-part response. One is around the experience of the users of the building, and I think there are classes of buildings where we take that into account, and there are classes of buildings where we don't. So was recently having a discussion around prisons and how often do we go and ask ex-convicts or indeed those who are still living in those on a mandatory basis what their experience is of the prison that we built for them and if it is actually supporting their path to rehabilitation. And I just find that really interesting because if we don't deem the users of our buildings worthy of understanding the impact of the design that we have imposed on them, then I think there's real ethical issues there for us as building designers and engineers. On a sort of much more prosaic side, the focus on embodied carbon, I think, is really important, and it's catching up, I think, to what we've been doing for many years around energy efficiency and energy consumption, but it's now exposing a gap between our modeling of energy consumption for buildings and our knowledge of what happens post-construction. And that is a gap that we really need to fill because we could be acting on completely incorrect information. And in fact, we know in many cases we are. We know that there's a big energy performance gap. And of course, the UK Nuclear Carbon Building Standard is designed to try to bridge that gap, as is neighbours. But that post-occupancy piece and linking that back to our job as leaders in building and design, I think is really critical to being ethical building designers.
Yes, thanks. Thank you for the question. I think it's I've been 20 years working as a landscape architect, urban planner, and I think if we link back to the leadership part and the end user stakeholders, so it's so easy to engage only with the easy stakeholders or end users, and I think we need to really, in order to do the right things, be successful in the right things, to identify all the relevant stakeholders, future generations, nature, all the different groups of people that are somewhere between the lines and so on. And this means that we need to really push some extra efforts. And the second part is that when we get any kind of feedback, how do we react? Are we still trying to convince the others to, eat our, message and story and the plan, or do we really actually take it into account? And is it real collaboration? Are we together designing the future and the surroundings? And so I think there's it takes some courage to actually really truly engage with all the relevant stakeholders, and that's where we, I think, would like to the leadership as well.
Courage, yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you. Just building, Alina, on what you were speaking about just now, how do we help shape the narrative for our end user so they have the buy-in for the change that we want to make? I work in the public sector, so we get a lot of scrutiny, as was mentioned, because we're in such a visible space. So how do we start bringing that conversation to the people that we're impacting the most, to make the relevant changes with the foresight of something not being completed for 10 years and costing X, Y, Z? Thank you.
Maybe if I continue, I think it is we need to use all the skills and creativity to identify what motivates different people, to even give their input, feedback. That's sometimes even difficult, but also how to motivate, what motivates them, how can we get them engaged so that there's actually some sort of shared vision. And I think the motivational part, it varies, even though the goal is the same. So just to customize what does this mean to you? Then the conversation is in a way balanced, and then we get people on board.
Ollie?
Thank you very much. I think as for the sort of around our side, we're technical experts, and we try to advocate to our team that design is the way to connect technical expertise with real world problems, and engineers should be people who are creative and full of those ideas that can solve real world problems. I'm going to ask a question that I think has different perspectives, certainly from the architectural community, and I've had the pleasure of working with the Islands practice, and it's very much, engineers are seen as design process, but I've also worked with architects who are actually being told we're not designers, just make it happy. So should we just wrap up the conference? We're not designers and that's that, or what do you think? I guess the question is, what is the role of technical experts in design, if there is one indeed?
Right.
Your name was mentioned.
You need the whole orchestra, and the one thing that we as architects are, we have effectively, I think we should act as if we have no knowledge, we have no expertise, and we're always questioning. So actually, if we've got any skill, it's listening and bringing together the thoughts and ideas of the experts. And I would say all of the projects that I've worked on over the years have all, without a doubt, had that expertise has been there to generate what becomes a sort of idea that sparks the answer. I've never had the opportunity to work anywhere else, so I don't know how other people do it, but certainly that's how we do it. It's what gets me in the office every Monday morning, excited for another week. And as I think I said in my little talk, you start off your career thinking you know everything, you end up knowing you know nothing, and therefore the expertise you realize through the years is more and more, and becomes more clearly evident that without that we have nothing. So that's our skill. It's, as I say, it's the conductor, bring it, and you can be many bows in the orchestra. I'm very happy to participate with you and help.
Yeah, if I may add one thing, I think there's a huge potential in this technical expertise, just not in giving the right answers, but really using the expertise and knowledge to asking the right questions. And I think that's very much needed nowadays, or now with this rethinking the whole problem. What are we solving, and what's the are we successful in the right things? So before starting to do answer as an expert, I think the first thing is to think, are we asking the right questions? And then there's a lot, I think, can be offered. Yeah.
I'd say there's. So I never, before this job I worked at Arab, and I was lucky enough to work with firms that always included the engineers from the outset on every project. So again, I've never been through that process, but since having this job at the institution, I've encountered lots of engineers who have exactly the problem you described, where they say, well, we don't get invited to the table. How can we possibly make change happen? But I think the answer is that there's always an opportunity to speak up, and maybe it won't be instigated on this project, but it lays the foundations for you maybe being asked next time to come to the table a little bit earlier. I give we run a training course called Net Zero Structural Design. We usually do it as a sort of institutional thing. People sign up individually, and sometimes we run it in-house. And I get feedback from engineers all the time. We're not at the table. We can't make change happen. It's so hard. We got asked to give the course in-house to an architectural practice. And the feedback from the architects was, but we're never at the table early enough, have you? Then, this is completely true. About 6 months later, I actually got the opportunity to give the same course in-house to a bunch of project managers, the county council, the clients, and they said the exact same thing. So I think what it taught was that no matter where you are at in this process, you will always, if you've got any scale of ambition to change things, you will always feel like you're being held back by something, and therefore the only thing you could ever do is to speak up when you're not being asked to speak up. And that architectural firm, what they ended up doing was they wrote a standard clause into their terms and conditions that says at the start of every project, no matter when they get appointed, they insist on running a questioning the brief workshop with the client, and the client has to attend. They don't have to take on board any of their suggestions whatsoever. They do it as a sort of fun afternoon where they all come down and they tear the project to pieces and say, well, what else could we have done? And then they leave it there. And they said that since they've started doing it, the amount of their repeat clients who phone them that little bit earlier and say, come in for a coffee, has definitely gone up. So I think, speak up when you're not being invited to.
Can I add one more shot to that? Because I think this links back to the question around designing government and policy. Because as someone who's worked in public policy and is not an engineer, I can say that the mindset, the way of thinking is actually quite different. And I think what engineers and designers bring to the table is a more agnostic point of view, an interest in creating a solution, but not a dedication to what the solution has to be. Whereas often in public policy, you have a predefined destination and a route you want to take to get there, and it's about figuring out how to get down that route. So I think the creativity, even though we think of it as a hard skill engineering, I think the creativity and the sort of the can-do-itness of engineers and designers has a real place at the table. And I think you should continue to think of yourself as a designer.
Good, thank you. I think we are almost out of time. I just asked this one question, if I could ask you to engage with it and with as short an answer as possible, because it is about this whole matter of the future of our professions. One of an attribute of a leader is that leaders look into the future and decides which direction we should be going, and that they should have foresight, etc. There's a World Economic Forum report, The Future of Jobs, that comes every year, came out like last week. It says like 40% of the current jobs will be changed, will be different in 5 years' time, I thought. I mean, I'm not sure, but as short as that, is a short period of time. And that is something that has been in the minds of a few of us. So we have been battling with this whole idea of transdisciplinary and how AI and other things can get involved with us. And some of the professions that may not exist in 5 to 10 years are very close to us. I won't mention because I don't want to worry people. You can read the report. A structural engineer who's focused on doing the structural frame to the most efficient and best way per se may not exist in the way it does now, because there are some powerful machines that can do 5 million options in half an hour or shorter. What do you think? Maybe it's a small question, right? So quick answers. How do you see the future of our profession? Do you think in 15 years' time we're going to be an architect, a structural engineer, an MEP engineer, facade consultants, this, that, and the other, sitting around the table, resolving things and doing beautiful buildings? Ivan?
I hope so. Although, it has to be said, I think the profession has been eroded for sure. Hopefully the lessons of Grenfell may give you some direction where it shouldn't have been eroded. But I think the profession will still be around, and that goes back to the money thing. If it goes horribly wrong, you've got to blame someone, not something.
So we'll still have our uses. Well, what do you think?
Well, I asked the same question about 7 years ago, and I read the response recently, and it made me cringe. So I'm not going to ask you a question at all. It's impossible to tell, right? It's absolutely impossible to tell. This industry is changing really quickly. You can't, no idea at all where we're going to be 5 to 10 years time. So I guess all I would suggest is trying to work out where we're going to be in 1 year's time and making sure you've still got a job there. If we do that every year, maybe we'll understand.
I would like to see the other side of the coin, not what are we going to lose, but what can we get? What's the potential? Where should we be? Where do we want to be? What kind of professions do we want to see in the future? What are the new crazy titles that we would like to see in the, So I think, it's up to us a lot. So to take leadership also on that.
So I had a conversation with my son last night, who's 10, and I was trying to convince him to start a coding club, which he's done a bit of coding before, and we were saying, I should really get into it. He turned to us and said, I'm going to be able to tell AI to code for me. I don't need a coding club. And I thought, okay, so I want you to do the coding club, but if that's the way that he's already thinking at 10 years old, he is going to acquire a different way of engaging with the world and utilizing his skills than I grew up with. And I can't even conceive of it. So I am going to go with Will on this one and say, I don't know, but I know that we no longer drive horse and buggy. And I know that I know how to do as a stick shift. And I know that even that skill is going to be obsolete in the not too distant future. So,
well, we have 4 different answers. I don't know. Don't answer. A hopeful one. I hope that we're going to be around. And one that, yes, there are obviously opportunities that if we lose certain jobs, we gain others as we have. We've never had so much technology. We've never had so many people in employment. So this idea technology is a job killer is not been factually correct, so it won't be the case as well. With that, I thank you very much for your engagement with us, and thank you all for being with us today.